Over the next 15 to 20 minutes, we're going to walk through how to run the Let's Fly to Russia workshop, a game for helping Agile teams better prioritize their work using the idea of a trip to Russia as an example. We originally developed this game for the non-technical members of our team. Our subject matter experts, our VPs, our directors, anyone who doesn't really have a strong technical background or wasn't familiar with Agile to begin with. Even if you have no idea what Agile is, you can still use this workshop to help the people that you're working with understand how to prioritize their work and get more things done. So why Russia? There are many different ways to run an Agile project. The way that I prefer uses a concept called Moscow to help prioritize work. We want to take everything that we have to do, every task, every feature we want to build, pretty much everything on our plate, and give it a Moscow rating. Which means we can make something either a must-have, something that we consider critical to the success of the project. Good examples of these are legal requirements or anything that is critical to the scope of the project. We could call something a should-have, something that we really should do. These are not absolutely critical to the success of the project, but they're really big wins if we do them. But if for some reason, in a worst case scenario, we can't get it done, we either have a way to work around it, or without it, our project will still be successful. Next, we have the could-haves, or what one coworker of mine liked to call them, the cutes. These are things that are fun, they're exciting, they're great add-ons, but we can really do without them. Lastly, we have the won't-haves. These are things that we decide we're not going to do, either because they don't fit the scope of our project, or because we simply realize we don't have enough time and we don't feel that they're critical enough for us to spend the time on them. Some people like to call these won't have right now. I really dislike using that terminology because one thing we have to realize is if we decide we're not going to do something, the reality is we may never get to it. And we're better off recognizing that now than making false promises for later. Now that we've talked about the idea behind the workshop, let's talk about preparing for it. You're going to need a few things. First, some game cards. These are just a collection of items that you might take with you on a trip to Russia. So a passport, a Russian visa, maybe a travel pillow, suitcase with clothes, things like that. If you'd like, you can download a copy of the game cards that I use, or you can go ahead and go out and find your own. I typically use a set of 18 game cards because I'm going to tell them that they can bring 15 of them in their suitcase and they have to leave 3 of them behind. This helps people learn to make hard decisions and to identify things as won't-haves. You're going to want a set of game cards for each group that you're running this workshop with. So if you have a workshop of 30 people, you'll probably want to break them into 5 groups of 6, and you'll need a set of game cards for each one of them. You'll also need some markers and some index cards. You'll want 5 index cards per group in your workshop. So again, if you have 5 groups, you'll want a total of 25 index cards. And on each index card, you're going to take your marker, and each group will get one must, a should, a could, and a won't have card. And on that last card, you're going to want to think about some reasons why someone might fly to Russia. Maybe for vacation, for a photography project, for a business conference, or for a swim competition. And you're going to take that reason and write it on that last index card. You want to have a different reason for each group because we're going to have these different groups talk about why they maybe took the swim shorts and made them a must because they're going for a swim competition, but the person going for the business conference said, I'm going to leave this at home. We'll need a roll of tape for each group. And the last thing you'll want is a slide deck. Now, this is really an optional item. I only use this if I'm running the workshop with Agile teams because I like to go into a little bit of background on how Moscow fits into the Agile methodology. You can download the slide deck as well and just use mine instead of having to go and make your own. Let's go ahead and walk through running the workshop. The first thing I do when I kick off the workshop is introduce the game. I like to use a little narrative saying, today we're going to fly to Russia, and give them an idea of what the different items that I have in front of them are for. If I'm planning on using the slide deck, this is when I would use it. I usually break everyone into groups before we actually start the workshop. It helps things run a little bit smoother. But if I see a lot of people coming in and clustering with groups of people they're already familiar with, then I might ask them to break up their groups or to count off and break them into groups after I've started and introduced the workshop. That way I get a nice mix of people who are all meeting each other for the first time. I'm going to give each group a set of index cards, a roll of tape, and a set of the game cards. And I'm going to have them find a nice spot on the wall to tape up their must, should, could, and won't cards, and then go through each game card and assign it as either a must, a should, a could, or a won't. So I want them to go through and say, oh, here's my passport. This is a must. Here's my in-flight snacks. I'm not going to bother bringing these. I can't fit these in my suitcase, so I'm going to make these a won't. I tell them that they have to have 3 items that are won't haves. I usually phrase it as, unfortunately, you can only fit 15 items into your suitcase, which means you're going to have to leave 3 at home. The reason why I make them have at least 3 items that are won'ts is because I want them to learn how to make hard decisions. I want them to learn that sometimes they can't have everything right now, which leads us into the key discussion points we want to bring up once they've all categorized their different game cards and put them up on the wall. We want them to look at each other's prioritizations and start talking about them. The first thing I cover is the I need it right now mentality, or the I have to do everything. People are so used to having people say, I need this, I need that, this is critical, without thinking about the larger goal or larger purpose, the context for what they're trying to accomplish. And what we really want our team to learn is that in Agile, you can't have everything right now, and you really need to prioritize because we need to focus on those key ideas. And in fact, we need to make sure we have a matching vision. This is where I have them reveal the reasons that they're flying to Russia. I want them to start to talk about why the people going to the swim competition made the swim shorts a must, while the person going for the business conference made it a won't. When we're working on a project together, and we're working as a team, we're going to have different ideas of what is important based on our vision for what the project should do. And what we really want to get out of this workshop is that everyone understands that we have a limited amount of time. We can only do so much work, and we all need to come to a matching vision, or else we're going to sit there and fight over how important each tiny little piece is. The other little thing I want to cover are dependencies. A lot of times we think that, hey, I want this done, this is important, let's do this, and I try to ignore the other things related to it. When to do one task, I have to do 2 or 3 other tasks. Or if I want to build one software feature, I have to build 2 or 3 other software features, or do some back-end work with the server and the database so that we can make the feature work. And people forget about that part of the work sometimes when they're sitting there and saying, I need this or I need that. There are 3 items in my game cards: a cell phone charger, and a American to Russian plug adapter. And the reason I have these objects is if someone decides that the cell phone is critical, if it's a must-have or a should-have, what that does is suddenly those other 2 items are important, and we have to bring them with us, because without the charger and without the adapter, our cell phone is useless to us. It's a brick. We may as well have left it at home. Using those 3 items helps me cover the issue of dependencies and help the team realize that sometimes they will have tasks that they don't really want to do, they would rather not do, but in order to get some of the other things that they want done, they're going to have to do them anyway. I want to bring it full circle and bring them back to our project at hand, or what we're trying to accomplish as a team. I start asking them about how they see the vision for our project, or how we might define what a must is and a should and a could for our project. The last thing I go through is feedback. I want to get an idea of what people thought of the workshop and ask for places where I can improve it in the future. If you can put a survey together or a quick questionnaire, that's a great way, but it's also good to, at the end of the session, just simply ask a few questions. Did people like this? Did it work? Were there any problems? What did you like about it? They get a chance to voice their opinions too. It's not just you pushing them through the process. To wrap up these instructions, I'm going to explain how to incorporate some Agile themes into the workshop and how Moscow fits into the Agile process. If you want, you can skip to the end. For those of you interested, let's go through this quickly. Using Moscow differs a little bit from the traditional Agile process. And there are a lot of positive reasons for using the Moscow approach. For those of you who are new to Agile, you have a team of people who are all led by a product owner. They sit down and they say, I want this, I want this, I want it to do this, I want it to have this feature. And they document these into what are called user stories, basically a unit of work. And then they prioritize each unit of work as either a must, should, could, or won't. Then the team estimates the amount of work they think they can get done either in the next 2 weeks or 3 weeks. We decide this ahead of time, and then we always work in either sets of 2 weeks or 3 weeks. We call this time a sprint. We say, all right, we think we can get this much work done, so we're going to take this piece of work, this piece of work, that piece of work, and we fill up what's called a sprint backlog. Basically, our list of things we're going to get done during that sprint. In the traditional Agile approach, you usually just say, well, I have these top 20 things. I'm just going to get these top 20 things done and start working from the top of my list in the order that I think they're most important. When we use Moscow, we take a slightly different approach. We want to say, all right, 60% of the work I'm going to do is going to be musts, and then 20 is going to be shoulds, and 20 is going to be coulds. And the reason why we do this is even in the worst case scenario, chances are you'll get 60% of the work that you plan on doing done. This means that you get at least all of your must-haves done. Now we're planning on getting the should-haves done. We're planning on getting the could-haves done. And so during the workshop, we do want to emphasize, if we're going to incorporate Agile themes, that just because something's a should or a could doesn't mean that we're not going to do it or that we're not going to bring it with us on our trip. What it means is when push comes to shove, if we have to, we can let it go. In most cases, a team will get about 80 to 90% of the work they estimate they'll accomplish done. When teams get really good, they'll actually do more than that, and they can start putting more work in the middle of the sprint. Now, what happens then throughout those next 2 to 3 weeks is every single day, the team has what's called a scrum, where they get together and they talk about what they got done the day before, what they're going to work on today, and anything that's stopping them from getting work done. And then they work on the things that they want to get done in that sprint. At the end of the 2 to 3 weeks, ideally all that work gets finished up and they have a finished product. If they wanted to, they could release it out for people to use. Now, we don't live in a perfect world, so many times that isn't the case, but in a perfect world, at the end of the sprint, you would have working software. During the 2 to 3 weeks of the sprint, the team will continue to figure out what work needs to be done. Some of it will be new stuff that we simply hadn't gotten to yet, and some of it will be things we discovered during the sprint that we missed in our original planning. And this new work will get prioritized like everything else, and then we'll put it in the next sprint based on how important we think it is. That's it. We're done. Thank you very much for your patience and going through this workshop. Here are the links that you can go to in order to download the game cards and the slide deck. Lastly, I'd like to thank all the photographers whose work I used under the Creative Commons license. Please feel free to look them up and check out their other work. Thank you very much, and have a great day.